Once more unto the breach, dear listeners, once more, and let us plug up our ears with our wonderful Cup episodes. I am your co-artistic producer, Mackenzie, and I'm so excited today to be diving back into the Bard's folio to be discussing a National Theatre production of my first Shakespeare show, Henry V, starring none other than Jon Snow, Kit Harrington. Yes. And I'm joined by a wonderful panel of fellow listeners and watchers alike. We have the wonderful returning panelist all the way from Space Dogs and Twelfth Night, Dewey. Hello, Dewey. How are we doing today?
Yo, what's up, guys? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. What have you been up to since we last saw you in Twelfth Night?
Oh boy, I have been working
Uh-huh.
and going on plenty of date nights with the gal and hanging out and actually auditioning after the strike is over.
Woo!
And I went back to an old job of mine, which I'm really loving. So, whole bunch of good
Good.
stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And of course, we have our associate artistic producer, Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
And how are you this fine day?
I'm doing well. We are recording this in a daytime slot, so classic. I have some fresh sunlight coming in. Usually it looks like I'm in a dungeon with my ring light, so I'm happy to be joined by some sunshine.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm doing fine.
And what's in your cup, and what is your ensemble today?
Yes. So my ensemble, I'm taking a page out of the Catherine Alice scene of this production.
The boxing scene?
The boxing scene. So I am going to do a kickbox class after this recording. So I thought I'd wear my athleisure. And I've got the military braid going today. And then I'm drinking an iced coffee with caramel waffle cookie creamer. Look out.
That is new. I haven't heard of that before.
In my rose... kind of history play, War of the Roses cup.
Love.
And then hydration station, just some old-fashioned water. But yeah, that's me. I guess before we spiral too, Dewey, what are you sipping on?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sipping on a very fine protein shake because you got to make them gains.
Are you also doing kickboxing today, Dewey?
I wish I was doing kickboxing. I'm not doing kickboxing today. I'm still recovering from mascotting last night, so.
Nice.
Yes. Wonderful.
Great.
And then, of course, we have the man who wears flannel better than anybody else I know. It is the wonderful Ryan Borochovitz, our other co-artistic producer. Hello, Ryan.
Hi there, everyone. This isn't even flannel. I don't know what you're talking about.
Plaid.
Sure. Yes, hello. Happy to be here.
Hello, Ryan, in your wonderful plaid. What are you drinking in your cup today?
It's not even plaid, you silly man. I have the same beverage as Jill. That, what's it even called? It's an iced coffee, but the waffle caramel cookie.
Waffle cookie.
Yeah, it's delicious. I'm an iced coffee guy now, as I've said on the past few episodes.
Look at that, Jill. You converted him.
Welcome to the dark side.
Happy to be here. Love talking Henry V.
Wonderful. Okay, and then, of course, I'm drinking some Crystal Light from my silver tankard, which I felt was very kind of on Henry V, Falstaffian kind of look to it. So I was like, fits the theme. And then I'm in my browns and greens today. So I'm kind of going for that military earthy tones, as well as repping my Welsh background there too. So there you go.
Nice.
All right. But let's get into this production, which was directed by Max Webster. And it starred, as we said, Kit Harrington as our titular Henry V. So what do we all think of Kit Harrington's performance? Because he did this not long after doing Game of Thrones. It's kind of one of his first big projects after he finished the show. And if you look at his profile picture on the program, it is the Jon Snow mullet, full beard headshot. So it's kind of, you could tell he was still in that era a bit. And what one could even argue, there's a bit of a Jon Snowness about his Henry V. So, Jill, what did you think of Kit Harrington in this role?
That's interesting you say that, Mac, and volley it to me first, because I sort of disagree with you. In a compliment, I think he pendulum swung pretty well away from Jon Snow with this Henry V. I think first of all, I love Kit Harrington. I think an absolute force of a film actor. And then watching this production, I literally looked at Ryan while we were watching saying, and he's also proficient on the stage. We love that.
What more can this guy do?
Right? So knowing that he was kind of coming off the coattails of Game of Thrones and everyone, he's sort of unfortunately falling into the Kristen Stewart as Bella Swan, Robert Pattinson as Edward Cullen. Like a lot of actors, sometimes if they're so entrenched in their one character, right, they can fall into the pitfalls of, great, now I'm only known as Jon Snow and not Kit Harrington.
He ended up in rehab because of how intense he had gotten into Game of Thrones.
Wow. I did not know that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully all is well post that.
Yeah, he's doing
I
good.
think acting wise, the pendulum swing to his Henry V, there was a lot of tenacity and like tyranny that we didn't see in his Jon Snow performances.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was lovely seeing him play a character where this is someone who is lusting and longing to be the king of all the realms, to not,
I don't want it.
yeah, it's like he does want it in this.
He does want it. But he's kind of brought it to wanting it too through there's some other backdoor politicians who are like, well, we can make up a reason to send him off to war. It'll be good for him.
Yeah. So I just think he did a really good job of playing their titular character. And also, again, I've said this a lot on other panels too, like having seen him as Jon Snow and kind of seeing his approach to that character, he did have a similar approach to this character too. And as an actor, I always love seeing that because it's like, okay, this is just you, the actor, stepping into these characters' shoes. So I felt like I still got the like contemplative, like groundedness that Kit Harrington brings to roles in this. And then, like the usage of even like his voice was a bit like huskier or pitched down. Like I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
His Henry V was quite physical. Like he was like always either like invading folks' space or like hugging other characters. Like I just thought there was a lot of layers that he brought to this character. And he said that speech and I wanted to go into war with him. So yeah. Anyways, that's me. How did everyone else feel about it?
Dewey, as a man who also has the Kit Harrington beard, what sayeth you?
Well, let me tell you, everyone is going to either throw their pitchforks at me or just laugh at me for this. I have never watched one episode of Game of Thrones before. And
Dewey, I am actually shocked. I would have thought Game of Thrones would be right up your alley.
I know. And I feel like it's just been hyped to me so much now that I'm always just like, yeah, I'll get to it when I see it, But it's funny. I didn't look at the cast list before going into this. So as I'm watching this, I'm like, man, whoever the hell this Henry guy is today, he is kicking ass. He is so good. Like, I wonder who this guy is. And then immediately as I start like looking up things halfway through, I'm like, oh, of course. Yeah. So yeah, I loved it. There was kind of like you say, like he had that huskiness to his voice. And there was moments where I really dug it. So I was like, oh, this is just such this character. You are given. There was moments where it got on my nerves. Funny enough, like maybe it was also because I was having trouble with the link at times, so I had to hear like certain things back over and over again. And I think there was moments that I was like, oh, okay, you know what? Just give me a little less hush right now. But no, I thought he was absolutely phenomenal. And same thing, his physicality that matched pretty much his physicality matched his voice in every sense. Whether I liked it in the moment or not, I'm like, this was so perfect. It's like, kind of like what you're saying, he was getting up in people's spaces, like very much at the very beginning, at the end of the we shall match these rackets to these balls.
Yes,
no fan
yes, the tennis ball scene.
Yes, I've done that monologue before, and I love that monologue. And that was the first time I've seen it done like that. I'm like, that was incredible.
Brian and I actually watched the like tangential interview clip that was on NT Live and that's the monologue he did to get into theater school.
Really?
Kit Harrington. Yeah, it's like a fun fact. And he shared that. And I was like, oh, okay, we love that. Yeah.
Well, he must have had much better luck than I did because I did it as my first monologue auditioning for Hyde Park here in Toronto. And the director at the time was someone who I was not a huge fan of because I had a bad experience with. So I was just like, I don't even want to get this guy. I just want to go in there, rock their socks off, and just be like, bam, I'll see you later. And I got so hung up on being good that I got 2 lines in, blanked, and then I said my final line of the monologue.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And
Love
then
it.
and then the director was like, Dewey, I think you missed the monologue. And I'm like, I realized that. Thank
I
you.
think you dropped the tennis ball on that one.
Yes, I
Wow.
did. Yeah, so I'm glad Kit had some luck with his
Yes.
with his audition.
Yes. Love that. Love that. And then over to you, Ryan. So we've had several big Henrys grace the stage and the screen. We've had Tom Hiddleston in The Hollow Crown, Kenneth Branagh back in like the 80s version, and then we had Laurence Olivier back in like I think it's the 50s or the 60s when he did his. Where would you rank Kit Harrington
Oh
among
my God,
those?
you didn't
people?
tell me you were going to make me rank. Like, I would have come more prepared to do that. No,
A
I
soldier
think,
must always be ready, Ryan.
That's
yeah.
right. And I
No.
figured you, as administrating adaptations, you would have already kind of in your mind where you would put Kit Harrington among your adaptations.
No, honestly, I tried to kind of approach this one sort of on its own terms. It's not
Ah.
really an adaptation, it's just a production of the play. They did some dramaturgical things by adding some material from the two parts of Henry IV at the beginning, which we can talk about more as we go, but otherwise this is a pretty straightforward production in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I won't do a ranking. I feel like it's not fair to all of these actors to quantify them in relation to each other. But
Come on now, Ryan.
I loved Kit Harrington's version. And I will say that much. I think what I want to say about him, though, kind of marries, Mac, your introductory comments about him like being Jon Snow, feeling a lot like Henry V, and Jill's comments about how he pendulum swung the other way. Because I think part of what's so great about it is that it feels like just such a natural choice right after Game of Thrones, where he played a very similar type of character, not the same character,
Yeah,
but
similar.
a young, charismatic lad who's a bit maybe wayward from the family line, and then becomes the king who everybody loves and will lead the charge in battle, and people want to follow him because of how I'm spoiling all of Game of Thrones now, Dewey. Sorry, but
No, that's good.
you know, you had your chance to watch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like on paper, I feel like if you're somebody, in what 2020 or whatever this was, working for National Theatre or Donmar Warehouse, being like, okay, we want to do Henry V, who are we going to cast? Or alternatively, we want to do a Kit Harrington vehicle, what do we do with him? The answer to both of those is Kit Harrington is Henry V. That just makes perfect sense. And the fact that he didn't sit on those laurels, which is what Jill is saying, just being like, yeah, I've already kind of played this character, I'll just do it like that, I think is a real testament to his skill and his craft and the way he approached this. And also something from Jill, you mentioned the little supplementary video on National Theatre at Home that we watched, that he also said, in addition to doing it as his monologue for entry into theatre school, he said that it's a dream role of his, that is just one that he's always wanted to play, kind of grappled with clearly on that lineage. And Mac, the thing you said, now I'm sorry to kind of be possibly relating this to personal baggage, but about how he checked himself into rehab following Game of Thrones, is something else that he said in that video, is that the character of Hal is an addict, and the plot of this play is that he is sobered up. That's kind of what part 2 of Henry IV sort of documents, that he's no longer doing his addictive ways, but that's still part of who he is, and how does he negotiate life of sobriety in relation to the immense power that he has here. So knowing that he maybe even had a personal resonance with that it wasn't just an actor choice, I think kind of could be an interesting skeleton key to unlock why it was such an impactful performance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, for me, like, I really enjoyed his Henry V. I mean, Kenneth Branagh will still always be my number one Henry, because his St. Crispin's Day speech is just so beautifully well done, that we happy few, like, just always gets me every time with the music. That scene just gets me. But Kit Harington's performance is so wonderful because it brought a different layer to Henry, because he's way more, as Jill said, aggressive. Like, just that scene where he executes the soldier with the knife is like, oh, your Henry has a very dark side to him that is like, can come out like when he really wants to be. And I think that works well, because historically Henry V was a warmongering king who, took over part of France, and then his son Henry VI loses all that land and power literally one generation later. So, but he's like one of those really fascinating historical figures. I think Kit Harington brought some real humanity to a character that, oftentimes we see him as the classically portrayed bowl cut painted man. We hear the great story about the time he got a bolt shaft into the face and they had to like cut it out of his face using honey, and and pincers, and oh yeah, it was like large, like right here, and they only had to cut cut it open layer by layer to pry it out. And he was like, once again, not sedated. This guy just sat on a table as the doctors ripped this thing out of his face that could have potentially killed him if it had gone any deeper. So it was like a very tricky surgery for the time. So you hear all these great historical stories about him being this great, powerful monarch. But I think what's shown here is the human grayness of this figure who, there's the scene with him and Catherine, and it's aggressive.
Mhm.
There are moments where she's forced to kiss him, and it's like, no, you're going to kiss me because you're part of my deal here. Like, you're going to go with me. And it's like, ooh, this feels icky. This doesn't feel romantic or playful, like the Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson scene does. Or there's other versions where you see a bit more of a playful, loving match between Catherine and Henry. And it's like, no, this is a warmonger coming in, taking over. And part of the deal, which happened a lot of time in Europe and everywhere in the world where there were land conflicts, you know, you then bind yourself to another powerful player of the land to kind of cement yourself. I mean, we see it in Game of Thrones with
Mhm.
Ramsay Bolton marrying Sansa Stark. Sorry, spoiler doing. Um, but there's a reason for that. It's geopolitical effectiveness to, link up the houses even more to kind of get everything put together. And so, but it's all the grayness that goes in. It's messy. Like him, even in the scene with him executing Lord Scroop and what's their face, Westmoreland, I think. No, not Westmoreland. Whoever it is that he has executed for portraying him. Like, he's nasty in those scenes. Like, he's holding no punches against these people who
Mhm.
backstab him. But then you see it on the other side in his coldness when he turns his back on his old gang of crew from Henry IV. Like Bartov gets hung, and he's sitting there watching. He's like, "Nope, we're not stopping this."
Yeah, it's
Like,
interesting to talk on that, Mac, just because what Ryan brought up from the interview of
mhm,
Kit kind of going into the character being like, this is an addict. And
yeah,
now as the play progresses, he's sobering up. But a last
mhm,
comment he said in that interview, which Ryan, you didn't mention yet, but was, and he's now grappling, where do you place that addiction? Or like, where do
mhm,
you put that addictive behavior? And
mhm,
it's what you're saying too. It's through these
mhm,
executions, it's through these
mhm,
betrayals of friends, through these being a bystander to the
mhm,
tyranny. It's almost like you could see him working, using the character working through that. Like,
mhm,
he needs to put that sort of toxicity somewhere, and
yeah,
it happens to be in all of his political decisions, which
yes.
again, like tip in my hat, because as an actor, like to have that mission to go in and then literally have it completed or
Mhm,
seen through both plot and
yeah,
execution is, yeah,
mhm,
that's
yeah.
acting with a capital A. Anyways,
Love that,
yeah.
love that. Well, it's not just Kit Harrington in the cast, though. As you can see behind me, there are other people who share the stage with Henry V. So let's get into some of the ensemble members and who stood out to us. Dewey, who for you stood out to you?
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I will say, I guess. Oh, sorry. I thought that was a different question. Sorry. I thought. Well, I know we had the question of what was the weakest aspect of the production coming up, but I will say, like, I for some reason thought it was like, who did you find was the weakest performance? Anyway, yeah, I
That
thought
could be part of
everyone.
your discussion of that question. If,
Fair, fair.
if there's an actor that stood
Um,
out to you in not a great way.
Well, no, I was gonna say like there was no one that stood out to me in a negative way in this. I thought
Mm,
everyone did very, very well. Maybe there's a few things that I would have made as a different choice,
mm,
but that just comes down to my preferences as an actor. So
right.
yeah, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say that there's anyone that actually I thought was bad. But I thought Claire Louise Cordwell, who played Bardolph Bates in The French Soldier,
Mm,
I thought she was incredible. I also thought that Danny Kieran, who played Pistol in Westmoreland, I thought those two were every single time they were on stage. Like everyone was, but those two
mm,
specifically were so incredibly grounded, and I could feel the what's the word? What's the word? I don't know, but they were just so incredibly grounded. Like there wasn't a moment of like I don't believe you.
Yeah.
You know?
mhm,
Yeah, I thought they were fantastic.
yeah.
Mhm.
Love
Yeah.
that. Love that. Jill?
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to piggyback because Danny was one of mine too. I have
Mhm,
two in particular cast members I want to talk about. But going back to what you said, Dewey, I
mhm,
completely agree with you as well. Across the board, I think the whole ensemble was phenomenal. And can we just take a second to basically honor and acknowledge that all of these performers on stage are, most of them are actors, opera singers, and fully bilingual. Like,
Yeah.
and a movement, like strong mover, and or probably also trained in contemporary or modern movement. Like,
Yeah.
so like quadruple threats were kind of at the front line of this piece, or on the front line of this piece. So yeah, that just across the board was like, wow, okay, these people are extremely talented on multiple fronts. And then in particular, yeah, so Danny Currain, again, apologies if we are mispronouncing anyone's names, who played Pistol and Westmoreland. I think, Dewey, kind of like what the pulse of what I'm picking up from you and what I think as well is, this is an actor that like completely understands Shakespearean text and then also knows how to say it as if it's like everyday language, especially with this like version of the production. It's kind of like what my mom always says, like when she sees Shakespeare done where like people really understand the text, she's like, I love watching a production where I know exactly what's going on and I don't like feel like I'm getting wrapped up in the poetry and like it's, I'm not able to understand it. And I think through Danny's too, like he would point out things or he would like gesture to like the colon, or just his gestures really helped to marry what he was saying, and plus like the comedy he was using too in those scenes. And then I also want to shout out Kate Duchesne, who played Exeter and Constable of France. So she was kind of, to me, like a hidden golden nugget and like grounded force for both sides of the conflict. Like Exeter was sort of like Henry V's right-hand person along the way. And to see her, constantly be at his side and be faithful to his ideal up until the very end, when she's the one that yells fire to the firing squad of killing all of the French soldiers. And there's that like timid, emotional, that as a person, she didn't want to give those orders, but she's not going to waver away from following Henry V. I just thought her arc, her individual arc, and then alongside Henry was just like really well mapped out. And then also she plays Constable of France, which is interestingly kind of a similar character. She's the one that's sort of asking questions and not wanting to advance certain things. And you can also tell like there's, misogyny involved in this production as well, which I thought was tactfully really done. But again, she kind of created this voice of hesitancy and like asking questions and not wanting to be doubtful on both sides, but she had like the right answer all along. So anyways, I just felt she played both of those roles really well. I could talk about other people, but Mac and Ryan, how do you feel?
Ryan, who's your shout out?
Yeah, I'll give two shout outs to people who haven't been named yet. So the first one is Millicent Wong, who plays the chorus and the boy/girl, Falstaff's page boy, who is made into a girl here, but also the fact that the chorus doubling with this role works so well. I know we have a bigger question about the chorus coming up, so I won't talk about that dramaturgical function as much, but her performance of that role was so good. Like, she brought a bit of a playfulness to, certainly because so much of the chorus's function is inviting the audience to suspend their disbelief and embrace the artifice of theater. So there was this like genuine element of make-believe that kind of glimmered in her eyes whenever she did that. But then in all the scenes where she was embroiled in the war, that there was always this intensity and she was really living in it. So for somebody who has to kind of live in that liminal space between the fiction of what's going on and the reality of the stage, I thought she navigated that so perfectly. So yeah, big shout out to her. And the other one I want to mention is Melissa Johns, who played Mistress Quickly, Williams, and McMorris. I just thought she did such an excellent job in all three of those characters. She did a great job of distinguishing them. The whole sequence with the gloves and the duel was very well handled. Yeah, I do want to say, and I certainly don't want to make any of this about her arm, for lack of a better word, but I do think that there is something very good for both National Theatre and Donmar Warehouse, that they are casting visibly physically disabled actors and not making a big thing about it, creating the accessibility needs that people with disabilities can enter these casts perfectly well, but not have to be about that element of them. They are still artists and performers in their own right, and there's no reason to have to, beyond the basic accommodations that are needed to make the show about what will the audience think of this element. So I want to make sure she got a special shout out on those grounds too.
Awesome. I will say for me, because Henry V was my first show that I got to do, and I got to play Montjoy, the French Herald, I have to give a shout out to David Judge as Montjoy, and he also was Nim as well. But Montjoy is the one that I really want to give a big kudos to him for, because that is such a fun role. Because he gets to come in at the top being all peacocky with the tennis balls, but then there's moments before the big Battle of Agincourt where he has a very sympathetic moment with Henry. And he has the moment where he sits down next to him and has a complete kind of human to human moment with kind of the guy who's going to go in and butcher them all. Not that they're expecting that, but Henry is one of those great characters that way. But Montjoy is a wonderful arc of a character. I think David did that really well, where you see the journey of who this herald is, representing kind of the everyman of France, who's not the dauphin, who's not the king, who's kind of this kind of just guy who's going about his business. Like he's kind of the classic line of "Don't shoot the messenger," And I think David did that really well. Then of course there's Stephen Mayo as Fluellen, and he was wonderful, being this kind of feisty Welshman who, at the end has that great scene where he forces, what's his name, Westmoreland to eat the leek, which I was like,
No,
oh,
it's Pistol.
eating a raw leek.
Pistol,
Sorry,
Pistol.
Pistol.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pistol has to eat the raw leek. But it's like, you kick Pistol's ass for what he's been saying to you. And because people forget how much like the Welsh, were kind of the butt of the jokes. Because I mean, the English were still conquering the Irish. They'd already conquered the Welsh. And so the Welsh were kind of always just be like, yeah, you're Welsh, you're there. So we'll treat you how we want to treat you. And it's like, no, Llewellyn actually gives it it has a lot to do in the show, and he's really an important character. And I thought this actor did a great job playing this defiant character who goes, no, I'm not just the Welshman. I am a well-adept soldier and commander here, and we do our job well, and we deserve, proper recognition and compensation. So, remember that next time, Pistol, you have to eat the leek,
Remember that next time, Pistol, and I won't have to piss on you. In this
there you go.
production.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, so those are my two big shout outs. Our David Judge as Montjoy and Nim. And I mean, Nim also had that great scene with the clothing bag and the switchblade before going off to battle. That was great. And then, of course, there's Stephen Mayo as Fluellen. So, yeah. But there we go. And then also shout out to all the singers, because they were beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful singers. We'll definitely get more into them in our next question potentially, which was, what was our favorite production or design element? Ryan, how about you? What's the
well, I guess on the subject of you bringing up singers and singing, something that I thought was just, it's hard for me to even put my finger on what I loved about it so much, but it was the scene transition music was something that I thought this production really nailed down. Every time there was, just a transition between scenes, some kind of unique piece of music played that like really captured it well. I was constantly bobbing my head along with it. Like I've said this on many panels before, I'm not a music person, even a little bit. I'm musically illiterate. You act surprised. But yeah, I can't get into the nuts and bolts about what was so good, or music theory wise, why these song choices or needle drops fit really well. But of course there was also like the Sweet Caroline at the beginning during the party scene, which I thought was kind of like a fun what was the name of that techno song that played during the victory party?
Sandstorm. Darude Sandstorm.
Yeah, like I recognized that song that I'd heard before, but I didn't know. Jill's like, and you caught it even before it like really started.
That song's like baked into my DNA. It's like, ever since I was born. So I was like, oh yeah, this is Sandstorm.
Anyway, there's a lot of great stuff to shout out its production, but I'm sure most of you will cover other stuff, and I wasn't expecting to go first, but I thought this would be a thing that maybe wouldn't get as much attention, so I thought was worth bringing up.
Love that.
Cool.
Love that. Jill? All right,
Okay.
Dewey, how about you? What is your favorite production element of the show?
I mean, it was such a basic stage, and it was such a basic, I will say, like, I don't know, I haven't seen as many National Theatre productions, but I felt like this was such an intimate space.
Well, this is at the Donmar Warehouse.
Oh,
not at the National Theatre. So Donmar is actually well known for doing musicals. There's actually a very well-noted production of Parade that came through there, and then also I think Hadestown did several workshops out there too. So Donmar gets a lot of attention.
And it's like
Gotcha.
a traditionally smaller space that
Yeah.
for like more
Mhm.
intimate shows, like you can see
Mhm.
how close the audience is to the stage, and it's
Yeah.
not terribly big. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I love that it was such an intimate space for this kind of play, which I think adds even more into the chorus saying, "I am so sorry. This is imagine a giant war here."
Yeah.
Like, I think that makes it even better.
Mhm.
But the sound effects and the lighting and the smoke, whenever the backdrop would kind of raise up and it would try to resemble, bombs and war going on behind them,
Mhm.
I thought that was super effective.
Mhm.
And there was times where I was like looking and I'm like, that looks so freaking real. And I will say, with having actual simulated guns on stage, because we are in such a scary time with guns throughout
Mm.
the entire world, I thought, how jarring would that be to actually see what appear to be real guns on stage with those sound effects and those lighting? Like, so I do wonder if they had any like kind of trigger warning or any like warning before the show, just talking about that. Because I was even sitting here, I was just kind of, that looks very real,
Mm-hmm.
Good point. I didn't think
Thanks.
about that.
Yeah, because I know like a lot of places, like if you're a nerd like me, if you go to cons, what they will do now is that anything that be considered a weapon has to have an orange tip.
True.
So people know that this is a prop, this is whatever.
Mhm.
It is assumed that everyone is safe
Right.
in this setting. But to see war portrayed in such a realistic way, I think adds that extra level of kind of like a little bit of grit to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 Agreed. I can kind of piggyback off
Yeah,
of
Jill, get in there.
Dewey's findings, because I was also going to mention the back space that you mentioned, Dewey, with like the where the projections were and the smoke. I thought that was very well used, with like sometimes it being the English flag. So that was going to be my shout out, but I have two tinier ones that I will shed some love on as well. So to kind of pick up from the war element, I want to chat about and shout out the movement that was used for this. So they actually did have, again, through the tangential watching material on National Theatre Live, they had like a military professional oversee all of the movement so that it was done exactly how you would move in the army in the said time that Max decided to place this. And so I thought the execution of movement was really, really well done from like a materialist military point of view. But then also I like that they made it stylized. Like they're in those big group war moments that kind of like what you're saying, Dewey, can come across as quite jarring and quite gritty and literally on the audience's laps. I liked that sometimes like the jabs were clearly like movement jabs. They weren't necessarily punches. They were like flicks. And so like, I think is a really good marriage of paying homage to what the actual military movement is, but then also as a reminder that this is encased in a play, like it's a stylized version of it, which I think helps with being actor performers. And then also it does sort of create that element of this is just a show. It's not too real for folks, And then the other little thing, this has to do with us watching this show via a pro shot. I want to shed some love to some of the pro shot angles that we got to see on our screens. So particularly the ones where you had characters speaking, the camera's on their face, and our viewpoint basically was the scene partner. So there were some moments where you really got to see sort of the emotions and the working throughs that Kit Harrington was doing, and then whoever his scene partner were in those moments. It was a nice filmic sort of capture that, again, beautifully, we get the advantage of that watching this production as a pro shot. It depends on where you're sitting in the actual theater. If you got, no one was getting as up close as we are. And then just to add to that, again, that same mechanism used when Bardolph hangs and all you see is her legs quivering and shaking. And as that's happening, you see what's happening in King Henry's thoughts as well. So like, that was, that was a production pro shot element I wanted to shout out.
Love that. I mean, I will piggyback a little bit more with the whole concept of the back screen, because I thought it was used so effectively in one particular scene, which is the scene with the cardinal, where they're outlining the family trees to figure out how Henry's going to argue why he gets to be ruler of France. And that monologue could be so dry that I remember when we did it in Stratford, we cut that monologue way down to the bare minimum it had to be. And like even in on the Kenneth Branagh film, they cut that monologue way down. So like that was something where I really appreciated their clever use of projection. Same thing with like when they're at, I forget where it is, not in, I think it's Harfleur, and they're surrendering, and there's the screen up there of basically the woman's face who's surrendering with Henry on the bridge, and it's just the effective use of that screen work to help once again fill in some of the space, but not use it excessively to the point where it's like, okay, now you're just making up for the fact you don't have a stage and you're just bombarding us with overuse of projections, because some shows do that. And I feel like I'm watching a PowerPoint slideshow. But this was used effectively well when it's like, okay, we're going to use it when we need to use it. And everywhere else, we're going to let it just be kind of this dark wall basically behind us. Like even there's the scene of them coming in from intermission that shows them going along the French coast and you can see them on the map. So it's like great ways of just filling that in. And I'm not positive, but I would assume that because the actors are speaking in French, they would have had to project the subtitles up on that back screen.
Which they were. I noticed for a little bit too, because I was kind of, whenever they didn't have subtitles, like for us, I was kind of like, okay, for people who don't speak French or have or speak Quebecois, like how are we going to be able to follow any of this? And there was very few shots where you could see on the other side of the wall that they were actually projecting the subtitles.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once again, continuing shouting at our wonderful singers, I want to give a shout out to Andrew T. McKay for the music, because that choral work is just so gorgeous. I mean, there's a very famous scene in Kenneth Branagh's version where after the battle and basically they're collecting all of the dead and they find the boys, and there's that beautiful choral music and they did it a bit differently this time, but it's still like just that beautiful choral music that once again ties back to that medieval age there. So once again, they're mixing the time periods really well, where you get that modern day stuff with the costumes and the guns, but then you're also getting this kind of medieval Gregorian style chanting that goes on underneath that shows like war is timeless. This type of situation just keeps repeating itself. Doesn't matter the weapon, doesn't matter the armor. It just, shows up, and we can keep writing songs about going to battles and wars because it's going to keep going through that cycle constantly. So there we go. All right.
That sad note.
Yeah. And next, it's the weakest aspect of the production. And I actually want to go first on this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So, Ryan, I'm going to have to disagree with you a bit slightly, because I love Millicent Wong as the boy in kind of the page boy, but I wasn't the biggest fan of their chorus.
Oh no.
I didn't find them dynamic enough as the chorus. Now, maybe that's because I have Derek Jacobi up in my head, among like many other great choruses we've had before, who have done the role with a bit more flair to them, and with a bit more cheek, and kind of like that walking historian type feel that you kind of have them walking about and you feel them bringing you along. This chorus I didn't quite connect with for some reason. I don't know what it is. I don't know if maybe it was the way they inflected their lines, because when they're playing the boy or Robin, Falstaff's page, they had a lot of energy and dynamic to them. But as the chorus, they almost felt kind of zen, like they're like they brought their impartiality to the role, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna get you from point A to point B. Like the only time they ever changed that a bit was after the battle scene, before we get to the big Catherine Henry scene. It's like, okay, we got to skip ahead a bit here in the time period. So let's, let me catch you up on what's happened. They've gone back to England. And now they're coming back to France to do some more negotiation. And there's a bit more dynamic there. But yeah, just that first monologue, it just didn't quite capture me the way I wanted it to. I didn't quite feel that connection. Now, Brian's making faces at me. So
I can't tell you that you should have felt a connection when you didn't. As I think this is kind of just an agree to disagree situation. I don't really feel like I experienced it the same way as you did, but yeah, to each their own.
Yeah, but overall, they were a terrific performer, and I love the "Oh What a Lovely War" battle montage that was in there that I'm sure Jill appreciated.
Let's get it. Yeah,
let's get it. So there were moments once again, the moments where they were the page and the boy, that was great. It was just, yeah, the chorus almost didn't quite hit that level that I wanted them to. So that was my only weak element, because the chorus is such a unique role in the show that like you either have to hit it or I feel like, okay, we're not quite feeling it here. So there we go. Jill.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't have much weakness to chat about with this production. Like, I think through the first couple questions we've mulled through, like there's a lot of things that really hit the mark with me. One thing, this is so nitpicky, but when it happened at the back half of the production, it's when Llewellyn and Pistol, the actors, bring out the raised platform right before they do the sort of leak fight choreography bit on that platform. And Danny Careen, who plays Pistol, ends up spitting the leak out at Stephen playing Llewellyn. And then the leak is left over on the space. So a couple things I want to kind of unpack here. So instantly my stage manager brain is like, oh, great. These two actors know there's about to be a mess and we want to keep it centralized. So let's have them pull out this platform and keep the spit out leak centralized to this space. Now that's fine. And I do kind of like that as we go on, it ends up being a platform that like Henry V is walking all over and there's just like chunks of leaks and like no one's really, you know, I was trying to make a meal, but then because I might be like totally off the mark here, but like the leek, obviously, like in Welsh culture, like that's probably what like the potato is for Ireland. The leek is probably for Welsh, right? For Wales.
Wales, yeah. The leek and the daffodil are part of their national flowers, which ties back to an old historical thing where the king commanded his Welshmen to put leeks in their helmets to confuse the English. And the leek is important to the Welsh.
There we go. So I'm like, with that spit out, again, I was like, okay, if this is going to stay here and we're going to keep this platform here, then I want to see other sort of things or symbols or emblems, if you will, for Henry V to just trot over and not care about too. Because I think that, again, dramaturgically plays to this guy. He's done the thing. He's got the power. He's got the lands and he doesn't give a shit about anybody else. Yeah. You know, like it kind of plays into, so again, it's so tiny, but then I just kept being like, okay, so why do we have spit out leaks on the stage then on the same platform that like him and Catherine's, you know, become betrothed and like then everyone sort of walks through them before the bows. It was like, oh, this is going to be really cool how this is going to pay off. And then it just sort of it was just a thing. I don't know if anyone also wants to like comment on this briefly.
It's funny, I will comment on it. It's not what I was prepared to talk about for my weakest element, but it's funny that you bring it up because, like, you're so right. They pulled out that platform right before their fight. So you think, oh, just push it back under the stage and bada boom, bada bing, the mess is cleaned up. But I actually think it kind of undercuts. I think you're absolutely right that it's not good because Henry embraces Welsh culture as part of his own heritage. He has that whole monologue at the end of the battle about that. And he has Llewellyn as like, you are my brother. So I don't really think it tracks that he's stomping on Welsh symbols. If they wanted to play with that maybe he was being insincere about this is a big part of my heritage, and they could have really made a meal out of him, like stepping on the leak in. But it just feels like a thoughtless thing that, they had all the apparatus available to just get the mess out of there. And I don't really think it's hard to envision that any thought was put into what having that residue there means.
Yeah. And especially because the scene with the leak, like, and it being, it's so visceral, like it's quite literally like Llewellyn like shoving a leek in Pistol's mouth to eat. Pistol, you know, throws it out of his mouth at him, and then it ends with Llewellyn literally pissing on Pistol. So it's like this very like you know, it shows the sort of dark corruption of the military. It shows like these two like lines of ancestry clashing, like it. So it was really setting this micro stage for this to keep, you know, the momentum to keep going. So you're right, Ryan. I kind of did. If they weren't going to make a meal out of that leak, I wish they would have pushed it under. Out of the way. Anyways, the weak leak.
The weak leak. Ha! Very funny, very funny. Dewey, what saith you?
Well, speaking of a weak leak, I mean, he didn't piss on him for very long. So, just saying.
Ayo.
It was a weak leak. No, yeah, it's funny. Going back to the leak on the stage, it's something that never really fully clocked with me. But I just remember while watching the rest of them, like, oh, they're not going to clean that up, are they? Huh. Interesting choice. And I never thought anything of it. I will say, I realistically have no complaints about this production. But one thing that I've just kind of noticed as we've been going back through this is that you have an audience on three sides in this. You have one on left, right, and in front.
Yep.
And yet this play, from what I could see, is still staged for the audience at the front. And I think if I was a paying audience member and if I was on any one of the sides, I would have been very frustrated at that. Because there were scenes where, yeah, you can get a decent POV if you are in the on the wings, basically. But I mean, even the shot that you have behind you, Matt, or even like all these amazing things that we said that, like, oh, that they do with the backdrop, they have the lights, they had all this. Yeah, like, what are you seeing when you're on the side there,
Yeah.
So I'm very surprised, actually, that was how they decided to stage most of the show. But I mean, I wasn't sitting in the wings, so I don't really have a huge complaint. I guess the only thing that was awesome is that, like we were saying earlier about the subtitles, is that if no matter where you're sitting, you could see subtitles, which is nice. But yeah, that's the only kind of weak part that I find about it. I'm just like, I think you're blocking a good number of your audience by not accommodating that.
Interesting observation, and I didn't even think of that. So
Yeah.
good on you for catching that. So Ryan, tell us, what is your weakest element of the production? Do you have one?
I struggle to think of one, which I think is a testament to how strong this production is, similar to what Dewey was just saying. But the one thing that I, scrolling through my brain to try to think of, and again, it feels like a small petty gripe, because overall, I will preface this by saying I do think the double casting was very strong. Everybody did a good job of differentiating their characters. And, there was often interesting thematic links between who's coming back as a different role. But there were just a few moments, where it took me a little too long to realize which character I was looking at in a given moment. And it's not a fault of the actors for not differentiating the role. It was usually once they opened their mouth, sometimes too late in the scene, that I realized, oh, I thought I was looking at Pistol, but it's actually Westmoreland. Or like there was just a few individual moments like that. And I think why I bring up Pistol as an example of that in particular is because both of his characters wore military garb at various points in the plot. So it wasn't until he spoke, although I should have clued into the glasses, I guess, was the distinguishing feature. But it also just, it didn't seem beyond the realm of possibility that Pistol could be wearing glasses. And it wasn't until I heard the voice difference. So again, such a minor thing. And there was like a few, I didn't take note of all of the moments where I thought this was the case, but it's when you're doing anything with double casting, you have to be very deliberate about communicating that, unless there's some sort of strategic reason to keep the audience in a cloud of ambiguity there. And I didn't always find that they made it very apparent at the outset, although I think more or less it was always apparent by the end of the scenes.
Yeah.
Super minor thing. Great production otherwise.
Love that. All right. Well, Ryan, since you just went last, and we're doing one of these episodes where this last question always kind of gets volleyed to you first as our man of adaptations. Ryan, would you recommend this production?
It's so long since we've done a panel like this that I forgot that you do
that. Should it end up on a syllabus if you were, putting together a Shakespearean syllabi there? Like, would this be one you'd show? Or would you rather go with, the Tom Hiddleston version, the Kenneth Branagh version? Like, which version would this go in there with?
Okay, so right, I forgot, since it's been so long since we've done a panel like this, I forgot that you do always ask me the question phrased this way. So I, once again, didn't come prepared, but I actually do think I have a kind of good answer for this.
Yeah.
Is, as per what I said earlier, this isn't particularly a bold adaptation. I would, I would be hesitant to call it an adaptation at all, beyond the sense that all theatrical productions are adapting the text, but I think that's just lame as a stance on adaptation theory. But so if I was doing some kind of thing about adaptations, and particularly Shakespeare adaptations, this wouldn't make the cut because it is pretty much just a straightforward production. Now, if I was doing a Shakespeare survey course, I think this, and I was suggesting a version of Henry V for my students to watch, I think this would be my go-to. One, because most of the other versions I can think of are film adaptations proper, not stage versions. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say watch the Branagh one. I definitely wouldn't say watch the Hollow Crown, as much as I enjoyed that, and it probably is, in my mind, a similar gold standard of at least the Henriette in that regard. I wouldn't tell my students, if you want to get a good feel for Henry V, watch the Hollow Crown. Whereas I think this, as a standalone production of this play for the stage that still has interesting staging twists and shows ways that you can have, very medieval concepts like this kind of monarchy, this kind of war speak to the present day. I think it does it very well. And there is still a little, if we want to have an adaptation-y conversation, we can still talk about the ways that it did plunder some text from Henry IV Part 1 and 2 to facilitate some of the hero's journey character arc that we're trying to spell out for our protagonist. So in the essence of the question as you phrased it, I could see myself recommending this to students, but in general, I would recommend anybody watch this. I think this is a fantastic Shakespeare production. History plays can be pretty dry, and this one was never dry for a second. So I would very emphatically recommend this to anybody.
Love that. Dewey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off of what Ryan was saying, but I would absolutely do it, because I agree. I'm not sure if it's much of an adaptation as much as it is quite literally the play with modern tools. And to be quite honest, history repeats itself. So, I mean, I could very well see all of this still playing out, and kind of is in many different parts of the world. But I would absolutely recommend it, just because it is still to the, almost to the text, the exact same play. Even though, because I've also done Once More Into the Breach many times. There's parts of that monologue that were cut that I freaking love. Which, I know, I'm not, I will say, all the lines aren't always absolute. We need to have this in the show. I get it. But I'd be like, watch this and then go back to the text and read those monologues in full, because they are, can I swear a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
They are kick-ass. So
there you go. Love
nice.
Love that. Jill?
Yeah, piggybacking on both Dewey and Ryan's statements, this production, absolutely, I would recommend, for what Ryan said, of this being like a stage version of basically the words jumping off the page and being in the mouths of actors. I think for high school, classes and or early undergraduate courses, it's you don't have time to read the play, well, watch this, because it's basically...
No, don't tell the students to watch instead of read. You can do both, but don't...
Well, actually, some theater programs, you can't always do both. So if you do need to cheat and have 1 week because you're doing 7 hours of rehearsal on top of other schoolwork, this one, watch it while you hold it in your hand.
At least read along so you have read it, and then you'll notice differences, as Dewey just pointed out, there are some.
Right, but another thing...
Read those monologues.
Another thing I always mention on this question too, from watching this as a theater student, I think is very important to watch this particular production, because there is a modern flair, obviously, across the whole production, but there are certain scenes that are placed in a very interesting physical or environment. So for example, the Catherine Alice scene, the two women on stage are doing boxing practice. So, and then there's a scene in the French camp. They're talking about the horse, the Dauphin's horse, and two of them are casually playing cards. I find a lot with Shakespeare, even when you do them in modern settings, you can lose a little bit of the playfulness behind the text, so I just thought, again, I think it's a combination of both what Max, our director's vision was for this production, and also what this production was doing with the modern, even the party scenes. I think it's a scope into Shakespeare can be fun. And also when I love watching text where I'm because I get this all the time. I'll read chunks of Shakespeare and be have this outlandish environment for it to be set in. And then lo and behold, I watch a production like this and I'm yes, Catherine and Alice doing a boxing match during this scene where they're talking about how to say, the English versions of body parts. I'm I think that's such a great reimagining and relifting of the text. So I think it would spark actors' imagination, so especially acting students too. So yeah, recommend across the board.
Across the board. Love that. And I will also recommend it. I mean, like, we'll get into Henry V being a very accessible play, which may be why wonders why it's done so often among theater companies. But like overall, like, this is a very good standalone Henry V. As we said, the cast is strong, the direction is pretty darn good. Like even if they did do more proscenium staging, thrust staging, and didn't quite use the full stage, as Dewey pointed out, which now I'm thinking about, I'm like, yeah, they actually did do that quite a bit. But no, I think it's a very good interpretation of this play. As I said at the beginning, I think Kit Harrington and the director Max Webster brought in a lot of gray and didn't portray Henry as this, gallant Lancelot type heroic figure going in and conquering France. This guy's a bit of a dick and he's a bit in the gray zone, like, as every historical figure is. Like no historical figure is black or white. There is always gray within them that people can investigate and dive into. And so I think this did very well. And so I would absolutely recommend this production. I think it's a very good adaptation of this classic history play, brought in with some more modern twists, and while still also keeping the classic history alive within it. So yeah, no, I give it a thumbs up. It's a recommend from Mac. What do we say we get into some other questions though that relate more to the text, but then also tie back into the production a bit too. So first off, we have, this is the only one of Shakespeare's history plays to feature a chorus. What do we think might have been the reason for the chorus's inclusion? Do you think it is a necessary component of the piece, or could it be removed? Jill, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I'm glad you tapped me first, Mac, because I wanted to disagree with you on your chorus thing, but I was like, I'm going to couch that for this response.
Fair enough.
So, and I think I will kind of talk about it through the lens of Millicent Wong playing the chorus, just because that's obviously the one that's freshest in my head. Mm-hmm. So but this goes with like any historical play, any Greek play, any Shakespeare. Like I am obsessed with choral or chorus esque characters, because to me, and this isn't really like recreating the wheel here, but they really are that bridge. They happen to live in that like halfway, that bridge of like, we are in the play, we are, giving you exposition for the play potentially, but we're sort of omnipresent, and we're also sitting right beside you, audience member. Like there's this dual sort of position that choruses have. And especially I think for this play, it's neat having them because they sort of exude this exposition POV sort of like tour guide, if you will, to not only keep us up to date of what trajectory the plot itself is going on, but also it creates, and especially this was done through Millicent Wong's performance, like this more, what's the word I want to use? Like an average human, basically. I'll just come out and say it. Amongst all of this, the politics and like regalness that this history, Henry V, has through this character, the chorus, we are grounded. We are brought back to this. And I think Millicent Wong did that. It kind of created like this is like an average human that's sort of onlooking or giving us tidbits about this. It's not in the mouth of a politician necessarily. It's not, it's this omnipresent force that is most relatable, at least to me, in watching, being an onlooker, watching this unfold. So I think with this production, like it's giving us exposition, but it's also giving us like the peasant perspective, right? Or giving us the sort of average human perspective that to me is a must needed layer in an already like layered regal piece. I think similar is another reason why like Coriolanus is like one of my favorite productions as well, because I think that show does a really good job of like, you're hearing the political side, but you're also hearing body politic. You're also hearing the folks that are on the other side of the courtroom side, So I find with this one character, it really allows, depending on what you do with it as the actor or the director, it really allows there to be this point of view that no one else inside the story has. And I think, again, playing this character too is like a playground for an actor, because it's sort of like a Gravedigger and Hamlet moment. Like you can be, the wisest person on the stage because you know everything, you are all knowing, but then also you're grappling with the fact that your voice doesn't really matter, or, your voice has been shielded or sheltered. And so, yeah, I think that's many reasons why the chorus for this production is included. And I don't think it should be removed because I think, again, through Millicent, at least in my perspective, through Millicent Wong's iteration here, it really created this outsider too. Because even there were some instances in Millicent's performance where she was speaking a different language than English, French. And so we had, again, this and especially as this production ends with, the English flag sort of in reverse on the projection behind us, and then it all turning to red. It's like, what about her voice? And again, I think another thing we'll get into, but this piece, it really puts colonization on display and what are the pitfalls of one person being in power. And so I think the chorus, again, can just be this massive, either relegated to one person or multiple, but this scope into the subtext of what this piece is actually doing.
All right, great. Yeah, Joe, there's a lot in there to unpack. You just gave us a whole little mini lecture. I love it. Ryan.
Yeah.
As a man of adaptation, could you see?
Not everything has to be because I'm a man of adaptation. This is barely an adaptation.
No.
I just like plays, guy. Come on.
Don't worry, Ryan. Don't worry. They'll all tie together. So, as a man of adaptation, could you see a version that does have the chorus removed? And I mean, why do you think it was included? And could you see a version, or could you do an adaptation of it without the chorus hanging around?
Okay, I'm glad. So often you phrase a different version of the question that we all agreed upon at the beginning, just for me, and I'm like, this at least ties in. I can tie this into my answer.
Yes.
This isn't to disagree with anything Jill said, because I think, I completely agree that the chorus does serve that kind of function and suits it very well. And obviously, I love Millicent's performance, as I mentioned earlier, so no dispute there. But I will say, I think you can get rid of the chorus, and I think this production solidified for me proof positive of precisely why.
Yeah.
And two reasons that I think I will say. The first one is the small reason, and then I'll get to the bigger reason. The small reason is that the chorus is a dramaturgical element that comes from not just Greek theater specific, writ large, but Greek tragedy specifically. And this play isn't a tragedy. Most of the history plays kind of have this weird border position where in the folio they are separated into their own genre of the history plays, but you can understand the arc of the central character as, this is a tragedy that just happens to be labeled a history play because it's set in England, although then King Lear and Cymbeline are also, so who even knows what we're doing there in terms of the folio table of contents. But I think this is probably one of the least tragic of the Shakespeare history plays, and it's therefore seems a little incongruous in some regard that it's the one that brings in the element that signifies tragedy. Tragedies have choruses. Well, there's a lot of reasons historically that we could unpack, and one of them being that ancient Greek theater just started with choral chanting, and then drama was born when Thespis stepped out of the crowd and said, but I'm a character in my own right, and was able to dialogue with the chorus, and then Aeschylus added a second character, and Sophocles added a third, and the rest is history. But the other big part of why the chorus remained essential to tragedy for so long is because tragedy dramatizes the fall of great individuals who think themselves above the crowd, who through their hubris think that I am like the gods in my unique individualism, and having that conflict not necessarily existing as a conflict between the individual and the chorus, but framing it as you stand alone and everyone else is here in this larger mass, really dramaturgically highlights the singularity of the hero, somebody who has reason to believe they are better, but don't think you're so much better, because you will not be immune to the fall that will befall you. And while we can talk in maybe a later question more about the specific ways that this production unpacked some of the darker or less favorable elements of Henry's character, this isn't the tragedy of Henry V. He succeeds. He, has a successful military campaign and everyone loves him and he gets the girl in the end. And, this is like an 80s comedy more so than a Greek tragedy. So,
Ryan, I would love to see somebody adapted that way, like go heavy 80s comedy style.
do the John Hughes Henry V. I think that'd be great.
Oh, I'm so in.
I knew you'd probably like that, Dewey. So that's my first reason why, right off the bat, I think it's a little strange that this is the history play that has a chorus. If something like Richard II or Richard III, even for that matter, had a chorus, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. This is basically a Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
But so that's the first reason. But the second reason why I think chorus could easily be removed from this kind of production, not this play in general, is because the main function that the chorus serves in this play, and it's in every time the chorus speaks, is facilitating the suspension of disbelief. They say all the things of, you must imagine the stage is the battlefield, and when you hear horses, imagine the horses.
Yeah.
So that is a very helpful tool to have when you are doing a very pared down, minimalist, use your imagination kind of production.
Mm-hmm.
But this production was so heavily realist that, like, Dewey, you wrote down, I wrote down when you were speaking earlier, you said that looks so freaking real. And I wrote you down that you said that, so I could quote it back at you now. That's, this production does not demand as much from the spectator's imagination as the original Globe production obviously would have, with very little setting and props and realistic projections and explosions. Mm-hmm. So, of course, Shakespeare would add, I'm just going to have this person sitting on the periphery of the drama telling you, remember, this is a play, act like there's bombs, or, well, not bombs, but, imagine the battle because we're not going to be able to logistically bring that battle onto the stage. Imagine that we are jumping from location to location. And I think you could easily cut that from a production like this that doesn't require that assist in order to suspend the disbelief, because the realist elements are doing such a good job of already. It isn't a stretch of credulity to think that this is a battlefield. It looks like a battlefield. Yeah. So, that's a bit of a, it's not a, I wouldn't say it's a ding against this production, or therefore this production should have cut the chorus, but I think this production makes a good case for why you could cut the chorus, and why in very different performance conditions from the one for which it was written, we don't necessarily need this role in the same way.
Right.
And
Ryan,
chorus
I will piggyback off you, because I'm in agreement with you. Where this production did show me, because like I'm so used to having Derek Jacobi doing the "Time to serve, I'll play," like the big push the doors open. He's always there, and he just captures your energy. And this one showed me, I was like, no, you actually could cut the chorus out, because it's not like we're gonna know the full history of Henry V, where it's like, do we really need that whole monologue? Where it's like, yeah, they left France after the battle. Then there was a negotiation. They came back to France. Oh, it's like, no, just cut that and just cut straight to the like negotiation scene, and you'd be okay. Like, I feel like with the chorus, you either need to do something more with them to make them feel important, like tied into the plot. Because this one is, as Ryan said, this is the most basic, straightforward history play. Henry gets a goal. He's going to go take France. He goes and takes France. He wins the girl. Thus ends the play. But I mean, one could argue that Richard III himself is his own chorus within his play, because he does kind of go outside himself briefly.
And to be fair, I wasn't saying that Richard III needs a chorus, but that kind of have a more Grecian flavor to it.
But that one, absolutely, like that one, Richard II, Henry VI, could absolutely use some choruses to help them, move some things along. Like, but I agree with you, Ryan, that this is the one history play where I'm like, yeah, this is the most straightforward history play. But maybe it's because we're geographically moving so much further. But then even then, Henry VI Part 1 goes over to France with Joan of Arc. So it's like, why wouldn't you have a history or a chorus member there to like help direct audiences to what's going on between France and England?
And sorry, I'm glad you brought that up too, because something that this chorus doesn't do, it's not a Star Wars text crawl. It's not catching you up on the history that you need to know. Mm-hmm. It is a semiotic device to teach the audience how to watch a play more than anything. Yes. And, that maybe was very useful in the early modern period, the crisis of drama, as some historians have called certain elements of this. But it's really, we have such a cinematic gaze when we approach plays like this, not just us because we're watching it through a pro shot, But just because half of the audience there probably came to this production because they saw the guy in a TV show they like, an epically stoked TV show, that we don't need as much hand-holding about scene changes,
what
locations.
TV show was that?
Yeah, you know, Mad Men, I think it's called.
Bridgerton. It's Bridgerton.
It's Bridgerton. Yeah. Anyway,
Agree
sorry,
with
Matt.
both of you wholeheartedly. I can't keep it in anymore. And Dewey, you're eventually going to get to say your part. You've just been watching 3 lectures. I just think there's so much. I challenge us all going into the text and mining through the chorus's passages of this. I think there's something else going on top of this historical sort of kind of point A to point B piece that Shakespeare was doing with this character. I think again through Millicent Wong's portrayal and groundedness in this and being this sort of outsider and kind of being more, I just think it forces you to kind of reflect and ruminate on the stuff that you've seen on almost like an emotional level in a lot of these scenes that are fast and quippy and politically charged. And then you sort of get this reflection piece from the chorus.
And Jill, to my comment at the beginning of my comment is I don't disagree with anything you said. And I like the way that the chorus does create this sort of, community perspective looking over top it. And I think Millicent's performance was excellent. Millicent got my shout out at the very beginning. I just do think that maybe you could cut the chorus down or at least maybe rewrite different chorus passages.
Because I just think if you eliminate it, then you're cutting out an entire chunk of what this piece is doing, in my opinion. Then you're just watching, a historical rise and fall or fall and rise of a king. Whereas with this chorus, that's like an underbelly of, a point into what's going on.
Yeah, I like what the chorus adds. I just think watching this production with its high realism more than anything, it made me realize that a lot of what the chorus does is made redundant in a 2020s context if you are going to embrace these aesthetics.
Yeah. Well, I think what could have worked better for this chorus is have them be part of the projection, make them almost like a newscaster commentating on as they're going along on the map or something. Do something a little bit more.
I think that's
hammy.
Yeah,
I like seeing Millicent Wong's body in the space with nothing going on around her. There's no accoutrement. There's nobody on the stage, and it's just her voice. I think there's something very prescient and important about that showcasing of this person who is essentially voiceless. Exactly. It's an everyman, I don't know. Dewey, what side are you on?
Yeah, Dewey,
let me hear your voice, Dewey.
Or if you have different thoughts altogether, don't feel like you have to respond to our quarrel here.
So it's funny.
Or quarrel, sorry.
I've actually been all over the map with this question. It's because at first I thought, no, there is no stage that I've been able to see this show in a way where I thought, you know what? That was war and we get it. I get it. You know what I mean? But when Ryan threw my quote at me too, which I agree with, is that this was the first time where I've seen guns and I've seen all these different effects on stage where I thought, oh, this is quite jarring. And I think if you're going to get close to it, I think this is a really good production to getting at least parts of the chorus saying hey, use your imagination. No, you got it. I saw it right here. That being said, during the intermission, I'm not sure if the people in the theater got it. I'm sure they did, but we got it watching. Is that it said that the cast actually worked with, was it Marines?
I think, or
I don't remember exactly, but
personnel.
Military over.
Yeah, it was military personnel. They're talking about where their heads would be at and how to actually create that they are part of the military on stage. That being said, in speaking to the experience of people who have gone forth and actually seen war, what their perspective would be, as in, you don't need the chorus because that was close enough. Because I'm sure their point of view is hey, whatever you guys try to do here will not be close enough, but thank you very much for your attempt. You know what I mean? So I think as close as you can get to actually having a war on stage and getting that essence, I think this is great for it. As in, use your you don't have to use your imagination. You're getting a really good sense of this. I think to what we can only imagine what is actually happening in a battlefield, I think it still serves the purpose. And I'm also maybe a little bit biased in this because I actually really do like Millicent as the chorus, as the boy. I thought they were fantastic all the way through, especially that final monologue that ends the show. It gave me such a menacing feel. And I
Well,
was like,
if I can just kind of, yes, pro this, it allows there to spin these characters on their heads.
yeah,
Like it has someone inside the casing of the text try, even though they have no power to do so, to take characters to task in a way. It's subtle. It's very subtle. But I don't know, Ryan.
Something that, okay, I'm not going to rescind my previous comments, but Dewey, you said something that made me think of a counter proposal to what I said that maybe justify some of the things that I maybe took slight umbrage with. And that's because, yeah, like I was stuck on the fact that why do we need this how to watch theater lesson from the chorus in a play that is so realistic? And I think maybe as a counter argument to myself, maybe we need that reminder more than ever because of how realistic it's trying to be.
Yeah.
Like you said, Dewey, yourself, that like, I hope there was maybe a trigger warning that these look like real guns.
yeah,
And like, maybe we need to be reminded that these aren't real guns, not because they're walking on with like tree branches and look at my gun. And you need to suspend your disbelief that this is a gun. Maybe we need to remind ourselves about theater semiotics that yes, this looks like a real gun, that looks like a real explosion, but remember, it's just a play. Maybe there is a dulling of the semiosis is what the chorus is somewhat doing. Now, I didn't have that as a hat on consuming it, and I felt like it was being, dissonant or incongruous in that regard, but maybe that's the point. And if it is, I still don't know if I agree that it fully works, but I will at least concede that it justifies itself. And I don't want to say that it's without justification.
I think also it drives home the fact that, through this, and I even mentioned too with the militaristic movements, but also being stylized like you're watching a piece of art. I think also through this one character, it's the element of, see, you are watching art, but we are showcasing politics inside this art form. Like there's a propaganda usage for it too. Honestly, like,
and what I described of that sort of like reverse semiotics, it is a Brechtian convention. It is creating that alienation that I think allows for that propagandistic element that you just brought up that we will talk about in probably just a second. Fits very well. Mac, do you want to?
But Dewey, were you done? Sorry, I feel like I jumped on you there.
No. I'm pretty much done. I still, to sum it up, I don't know where I stand. Because I think on many different levels, for us to say, hey, we got war. That was war right on stage. We know it without being there. I don't know. But for what I can imagine, I think that was, as far as like the sound effects and also having guns that we do not know, because there was no orange tip and we did not get a trigger warning saying these are fake, whatever. We hope and suspect they are. Yeah, that probably felt pretty jarring to be in the space.
I hope even if they were real guns that they were empty. Like, just,
right?
Well, yeah.
Well, I don't know. There was a whole Alec Baldwin incident.
But
it's just like I can understand people being legitimately unnerved by that kind of thing, which is why.
Well, there is something actually in theater school we're actually taught when you were. I don't know if you back me up on this too, Dewey, but like when you work with like firearms, you're actually trying, like the staging of it is you're pretty much never allowed to be pointing at it at the audience unless they are warned. The audience is warned that is the case.
Yeah.
Like I remember that being a part of my training. If you had to use a firearm on stage, more often than not, like 95% of the time, the choreography would make the firearm either like point to the ceiling or to the wall or to the ground or like just past your scene partner.
Yeah.
But these ones, like freaking, you had the tips of everybody's gun like pointing at all
and
sides.
And bayonets on the end of them too.
Well, and that's what I mean is another very jarring part of this is that no matter where you were in space, those weapons were coming at you.
Yeah.
And if there was no, like, this will be my one, I guess, complaint about it, is that if that was not given, that's not cool.
Because
it's
funny too,
because of that exact reason.
Yeah.
And you said, Dewey, you're like, for most part, this is proscenium based, like the story is. But I will say, every time the weapons were used and we were on the battlefront, all sides of the theater were getting actors' guns in their faces. They did a really good job of playing the thrust based in those moments.
Yeah. It's just it's one of those things where, like, not to make it doom and gloom, but I mean, like, events happen in the world, big scary ones, and to have a place where you assume you are safe, but to have something so realistic come at you, I hope. Not consent, but I hope there was acknowledgement of that.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Well, speaking of wars and guns and stuff, let's get into the next question because it kind of ties into all that, which is when this play premiered in 1599, England was at war on several fronts with the Irish rebellions and the attack of the infamous Spanish Armada. According to Shakespeare scholar James Shapiro, Henry V was used as a propaganda piece to stoke the English to fight, particularly in squashing the Irish rebellions. Do you think this play still retains its original pro-war message, or has it become something entirely different? Dewey, since we kind of did a whole back and forth last time, and you got to sit and wait your turn very, very patiently. Let's get you to start this question.
And another question I am having a lot of trouble with.
Mhm.
Personally, I don't see how it can ever be anti-war.
Mhm.
There's too many rousing speeches that men, let's go, let's do our
Mhm.
honor. Hey, here's some money to go home and get the hell out of here. Take a bath, have a great day. Or you can be a man, you can take up your weapons, and you can honor the rest of your family for the rest of time and be in the textbooks. That speech alone, as long as that is included, I think this is a pro-war play. Maybe there is I don't want to say adaptation anymore. Maybe there is a Henry V
Interpretation.
play. Yeah, an interpretation that happens somewhere where maybe it'll give me a
Mhm.
different message. But I have not seen that yet.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ryan, what do you think about this question? As a man who has studied Shakespeare and gone into all that kind of type of ooey gooey background stuff, where do you fall with James Shapiro and his thoughts on this particular idea of being a war propaganda piece?
Well, I think it's indisputable that historically it probably was written to be a historical propaganda piece. I think the crux of the question is more, must it always be, or can it still be, or is it something different now that we aren't in the specific historical conditions of that? And I think, part of what you've written there in the question, Mac, about how it's about the Irish rebellions, it's about the Spanish Armada, none of that happens in the play. It's a completely unrelated war about France. Yes. So that already kind of indicates this transferability of this is just a play about war. Right. Any war, this war can fit into that war just as well. And that's why I think there is maybe a tendency to view it jingoistically as no matter what war you want to create a play to promote, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam for that matter, World War II, you could probably do a version of it.
World War One.
Yeah, certainly that this can be a rallying call for defend your country, fight a good fight. And I will say to that, I don't think it has to be that, because it certainly was that and will more often not be that if you're not careful. But I think this production did a good job of highlighting the ambiguity, the darker side of war. The execution scenes we've already talked about a few times were a big part of that. And even like the kind of awkward, forceful wooing of Catherine at the end as the spoils of war. This production is very much trying to say that it's interesting because I think it goes back to Dewey, what you were just saying about how, those speeches are so rousing, and I agree, and putting them in Kit Harrington's mouth does that. But then we have those other scenes where, you're like, oh, is this the guy I was just following and was so roused up to that I think, not that I would say this is an anti-war production, but this is a production that seems very invested in interrogating the psychology of patriotism and militarism, and that we can get so rallied up with this, even if we might otherwise have pacifist sympathies, or if we a moment later recognize that, I don't know if we should be following this. Henry doesn't really have altruistic motives for going to this war. He's the aggressor because the Dauphin insulted him with tennis balls because he thinks
the Cardinals think it's a good idea to send him off to battle to kind of tone him down a bit.
Exactly, but that's not because, and the Cardinals never get their recompense for that, or it's never like, oh, we realize war is bad and it's your fault for sending us there. It is like, this will send you off to become a man and get some more territory for the homeland, and good job, you did it. We love you for it. And I think it's funny because, there's the whole, I think it was like Francois Truffaut said the thing about that it is impossible to make an anti-war movie because anytime that you create the spectacle of war, you turn it into something that you can passively consume. And I think, well, part of me is wondering in relation to what you said about, like, could there be a version of this or staging of this where it is completely anti-war through and through? And how do you deal with the speeches? Well, maybe you have nobody in the army react viscerally to it. Maybe he does the big speech and they're just like, cough. The St. Crispin's Day. Like, even without adding text, it's just part of what rallies us up is the rhetorical power of the speech itself and the charisma of the actor doing it. But it's also watching a chorus of our peers being rallied up into it. If they're on board, so are we. There's, it's probably very conjectural, but there's accounts of the original production of this at the Globe where audience members climbed onto the stage to join the fight. Whether or not it's true is a different story, historically speaking, but that is the propaganda of this piece, that this is the speech you give when you want to rally people to war.
You're right.
And while I don't know if this production succeeded at counteracting that patriotism and militarism, I do think it created a microscope view of how we can question why do we let ourselves get rallied up this way? Do we agree with it? Sorry, Jill, you're making faces. Do you want to jump in?
I'm itching to respond. I have to respond. So go ahead. Keep going.
No, I was basically winding down. Go for it.
Okay, I just feel like this production does a really good job of trying to, because I think what you're saying, Ryan, it's on the tip of my tongue. Like, yes, the content of what this piece is pro-war in a sense of, like, quite literally on the page, you're reading it, you have the rousing speeches. But I think this production is pretty damn close to doing what I'm about to say. This Henry V can be a display of war. Like, it's displaying war through these, like, through the lenses of soldiers that aren't quite soldiers, but now you have to be soldiers, through the lenses of women that don't really want to be women, but you have to go to your place and be the woman that's betrothed. Like, and I think this production does a really good job, again, going back to Millicent Wong as our chorus, this like outsider to these two big colonial powers basically having a tantrum and being like, what about my voice? So those folks that are totally neglected when it comes to war, again, what this production did, having a lot of women still being addressed as lords, but being treated by their male scene partners as women. There's a layer of misogyny that comes in. And so why I bring all of these things up with this production is I think this piece as a whole does sort of have the potential, especially now in like 2020s, 2024 is when we're doing this recording, but like 2020 encasing of showcasing the patriarchy, the colonialism, the sort of like all of the isms that come with war. And I think what this production does a really good job, it sort of voices or tries to make sense of the nonsense of war. And I think to add to that, like, especially through getting Kit Harrington sort of backing our titular character in this production. And I think this could go with, I know this is particularly supposed to be about the text, but again, having that as my point of reference here, it's like the colonial implications, the impulsiveness, the selfish power, the fear of man, that these are all things that like are a byproduct of war or are a propelling force of war. And again, seeing like the fact that like one human being can easily bulldoze through, the whole killing prisoners for the sake of there's no other option. Like, I just think, yes, like it is pro-war in a sense of like the text, but I actually think like smartly this production took a step into it kind of being not entirely different, but being this display, right? This showcase of, and again, it's iterations of war happening all over the globe right now as we record this. And, again, the characteristics I've mentioned out of like the colonial impulsiveness, bulldozing through people's homes, killing because there's no other, like it's these visceral sort of, like look at what happens when you give people power or when things are forgotten or I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but I just wanted to pick that up because I think, again, yeah, it's a display of war. And I think back in the day when it was written, sure, I think it was like, yep, this is a really lovely like war piece. Here you go. Here's the closest thing, if you're not a soldier, the closest thing you'll see to a battle. Whereas now it's like, when we're looking at this text, what can the text be doing now? You know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I definitely agree. Like, I think back in the 1599, this was a very propaganda-based play where it's like, remember that time we went over to France and we won the day with limited amount of men and we took it all back? Well, guess what? The Spanish are coming with the Armada, so we need to get them in. We need to get people signed up for that. Oh, and by the way, those darn Irishmen, we got to go tamp them down a bit. So we don't have quite a great claim to their land, but, we're going to go in there and do our thing, but we need men to do that. And so this was a very good piece for that, because as Dewey said, there were very rousing speeches that, and as Ryan said, like he and I both heard the stories of when they did this the first time. There were many patrons who stormed the Globe to get up on the stage.
They took the chorus's memo about suspending disbelief a little too seriously. Yes, I believe it.
A little too seriously. And I think, now with our new eyes, I think there are nuggets in this text that do allow us to play more in the gray zone of the amplification of war. And I think if somebody really wanted to, they could turn this into a very different piece of more of a coming of age story as Henry goes from Hal to Henry. If you wanted something like, what's his name? Who did Citizen Kane?
Wells.
Orson Welles did that Falstaff thing where he did all the Falstaff. That one. So somebody could do another version of that where it's like going from Hal to Henry, and you take all that stuff that goes on between Henry IV Part 1, Part 2, and Henry V, and you get that all into one big piece, and you could make a very interesting, compelling character journey of who is this person, like who goes from being as we talked earlier, a addict, a drunkard, someone who is shirking his responsibilities, to now going off to leading a battle. And I also think there's a great political commentary too of, nowadays we see all the time where political leaders kind of find a very arbitrary reason to go and do something of, we have weapons of mass destruction in this one place. It also surprisingly has a lot of oil that we may want. So, let's go in there and do our thing there, hey, Ukraine was once part of Russia. So, let's, get it back because there's some Russians living over there. So like, there's a lot of stuff like that where today in the world, and even then, as Ryan said, Vietnam, World War II may be a bit tricky, but World War I for sure, where it's like, these geopolitical storming across lands for the sake of, our blood is hot and we're ready to, lash out at someone. I do think there's something there, but I do think there's a great commentary with the Cardinals' opening dialogue of you could play more into that in that first scene of them kind of amping Henry up, and the fact you have that whole great, really ridiculous monologue the Cardinal has to give about arbitrarily explaining the lineages and kind of like the weird back end way they got to get into this war is something I think you could really relate to today. But I do think this show will always have a bit of a pro-war or a war-like message, kind of like the war-like Harry. But I do think there is enough material in this that you could, once again, as Ron said, you'd have to direct it in a story. Like, for example, he finishes the once more onto the breach your friends once more, then nobody cheers. And you have to really actively work around it. But I do think there's a really interesting commentary you could give with this piece, because I do think Henry is a fascinating character, that there is enough in there that you could really play with him. And I think the fact that they brought back the Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2 scenes to show his arc leading up into this play, I think they were also tying him into that coming of age. Where has Henry come from before this play begins? And what is his mindset going into this situation? So yeah. There we go.
Jill,
I was just going to add to that. I do think in this production, they did they all had like a visceral response to that speech, but I think they did a really good job direction wise in the scenes that followed that, of showing like the sheer exhaustion and absolute helplessness and lostness. There's like that really striking, almost, this is very visceral, but like human centipede kind of scene where all of his buddies are sitting like back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
And they're fucking freaking out. Sorry, that's like
Nim's
my
lost
fifth
an
swear
eye.
word.
Yeah.
Nim's lost an eye. They're singing, I forget the song they're singing, but it's like Pistol's funnily like trying to like sing himself to sanity.
It's the
So
Sweet Caroline song that they're singing again.
is it that one again? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, I think that's a really, again, this like, yeah, we'll do it. And then you behind closed doors, you're like, what the shit? I have no idea what I'm doing,
Yeah.
So
But yeah,
again,
and
I think this production's really close to spinning everything on its head
Well, and
of
that's what I
what
was
this
saying.
piece was. Yeah.
And that's what I was saying, that the production doesn't excise the triumphant patriotism, but it puts it in contrast with something else. And then you have to, either be like, do I still agree with that? Or yes, I still agree with that, but recognizing that it's not all sunshine and bands of brothers.
Yeah.
Totes. Love that. Okay, last question of the day. Let's get into it. So Henry V is one of Shakespeare's most performed history plays. Why do we think this might be the case? Is there another history play from the Shakespearean canon that you feel should be performed more often and or that should be given more attention by artists and audiences? No, let's go with Jill for this one. Jill, you start this one.
Sure. I think all of us have kind of said an iteration of this along the conversation, but this is just a very straightforward, gobbleable history play, right? You've got your main character. He's, at a stage in his life, he's gifted this opportunity. He does whatever it takes to get what he wants, and he even gets the girl in the end. Lift up the boom box and walk through your high school football field and put your hands in the air. For those of you lost, I'm referencing 80s things. Okay, so so I also think it's just most like a play. Like it's it's most like you're starting and you're ending with, again, I don't know if back in the day people would agree, but I think in today's day and age, what I find with some of the other histories is there is a lot of characters played by different people. It's not as intimate, and you're constantly, needing to reference, at least on my end, like a family tree to be like, okay, this person is this son or this is there. And it's a bit more jagged. I find some of his other history plays are like, you were jumping all over the place. This to me is a little bit more cohesive in like, this is a plot line of a play. Sorry, I made a couple notes to making sure I touch on all of them. But yeah, so so that's answering the first half of the question. Second half of, is there one that I think should be performed more often and or should be given more attention? I think Henry VIII. I know, like Stratford recently we reviewed, a couple years ago now, we reviewed a production of that. I just think that one's not done enough. And I think that one has the same kind of qualities of this one from like an intimacy point of view. Like there's just some really good, like just human scenes in that, without all of the sort of battle accoutrement or having to follow this person here and this person there. I also just think there's a lot of titillating things you can do with the women in that one that obviously you can do here, as this production did with Henry V. But yeah, so I think it's done. It's easily gobbleable, Henry V, but I also would like Henry VIII to kind of start getting more coverage too.
Yeah, but people don't like when John Fletcher gets his dirty hands on things. That's probably the reason why Henry VIII doesn't get done as often.
Yep.
Dewey?
Yeah, so I think I've kind of said it a little bit before, but I think another reason why this is one of the most performed ones is because I think it's the one that's sadly so relatable. Going for land, which we believe is ours, but probably actually isn't. That is a thing that history has repeated itself for time and time again. Yeah. I think it's a very easy concept for people to understand and for people to get into as far as history plays go, and also realize how long it's been happening. That being said, do I think there are more history plays that by Shakespeare that need to be shown off more? 100%. Because I can actually tell you right now, this is the only history play by Shakespeare I've actually ever seen. I've read Richard II and Richard III, pieces of, but that is it. So for that reason, yes, because I can also just go and watch and read these things myself, of course, but it also helps when it's actually performed in many different ways. Because I will say, like, also, as much as I do love our local Shakespeare scene here, I will say the amount of times I've seen the same plays performed within under not just 10 years, 5 years in the same place. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
If we
There's
want
a lot
to
more
make
than plays to choose from, people.
Tons. And just like what Jill said earlier, not a history play. Coriolanus is my favorite Shakespeare of all time. I have seen that done in Ontario once within my entire lifetime. What's that about? I can only watch Midsummer Night's Dream so many times. I'm so sorry. Great play. I can only watch it so many times.
I'm donkeyed out on that one.
Dude.
Also,
me
is it a
too.
great play? I don't know. I have qualms
It's
with that,
an
but
it's
that's
an
another
okay
discussion.
play. It's an okay play.
It would be
Listen.
a lot better if we saw less of it, if we had time to
Amen.
miss it.
100%.
Or do
Maybe-
something with it. Anyways.
Yeah. Maybe if I saw it as few times as Henry V, maybe I'd be more into it. But yeah, so I think there needs to be more of that, especially because I feel like I'm kind of just adding more onto this, is that I feel like Shakespeare has, unless you're a theater kid, it has a very specific audience, as in like, oh, you learn this in grade 12, grade 11, and then you never touch it again. I think the more historical plays we show of that, we're going to show, hey, this is something else that William Shakespeare got onto. He was making comments on society. He was also talking about actual history, and there will always be cause to come back to these texts. So yeah, we need to see a lot more of what Bill has to share.
Can I also just briefly comment on that? I also I want to see companies do like all of the Henrys. Like even if it takes a year or like several seasons, I want to see like the same characters, like the same actors play through. 'Cause I feel like so often we get chunks. We get like Henry part 1 and 2, Henry the like fourth part 1 and 2, and then and then we get like what is it, like Henry VI? It's like part 1 and 2, but part 3 is not done often, or there's something like that. I don't even know.
Pretty much nobody ever does Henry VI unless they're going to do some kind of truncated 2-part version or one just the first part.
I'm like, just do them all. Like have a vision, have a like why you want to do all of them. Historically, chronologically, they presented themselves. So I don't know. That would be neat, and then almost like a.
I'll piggyback off that. I'll piggyback on that because Ryan and I went back and forth when Stratford was going to announce their new season, because they did Richard II this past season. And if you know Richard II, you know that they set up Henry IV. And he and I were like, are they going to do Henry IV? Because they haven't done that in a hot minute. Like, it'd be great to see them like tackle Henry IV part 1, part 2. But then they didn't do that, unfortunately. But
they're like, let's see Midsummer Night's Dream.
No,
they're doing
RNJ. To the writers doing Cymbeline. They're giving us a Cymbeline.
Thank goodness. The amount of times I'm like, we should just do Cymbeline. That's one that I haven't read or watched, so I'm excited for that. Anyways, keep going back.
But like, like Henry IV or Henry V is a very accessible one. I mean, that's why they do it in Stratford Shakespeare School as a 1-week grouping show. Like you either get to do Midsummer or you get to do Henry V. Those are kind of the two that they pick from. To like, because you have 1 week to teach a whole bunch of theater kids who are like getting introduced to Shakespeare, the first time to perform it, one chance to get it done in a week, usually. Or at least when I was there, that was over a decade ago. But Henry V was our first one. And it's like, it's very straightforward. It's very easy to explain to young high school kids about what you're going to be performing. It's got a good amount of characters that, people can have, everybody can get a good chunk of lines. It's got some great speeches. It's got some stage combat in there that So it's a great teachable play. And as we said before, it's got a lot of great messaging about pro-war, anti-war, coming of age. There's a lot of good stuff in there with that. But what I will say is we do need to do more of the different history plays. I mean, I would love for them to do. I mean, my personal favorite history play, as much as I love Richard III, it's actually Henry VI Part 2. Which because there's a lot of political intrigue in that one and a lot of fun dynamics that get played in there. It's like Richard III, but even more heightened because now you're really trying to depose a sitting ruler who's having his own problems. It's a lot of fun in that play. But yeah, I think that'd be one that I like to do more. But then also Titus Andronicus, that's another very war.
That's not a Shakespeare history play. That's
I know, it's a tragedy.
Because it's set in Rome, and that's the difference.
But so is Coriolanus.
Rome is not history. Yes, but are we talking history play as in play set in the past, or are we talking about the section in the folio?
I'm talking about the
British kings.
Yes, sorry.
Because there are plenty of plays. No, we don't have to. I'm just saying there are plenty of very popular Shakespeare plays set in the past that are not the Shakespeare history plays, and those ones get done very often. So it's actually...
Sorry, I was referring to Jill and Dewey bringing up Coriolanus. I'm like, Coriolanus is fun. Titus Andronicus is also fun to do too. But history play-wise, like just that category, I think Henry VI is one that could be done a lot more, just because... Is it the best one? No. But we've done a lot of Richard III's, and we've done a lot of Henry V's. So let's have some fun here and go into some of the other ones. Like, come on, Stratford, get out there. I mean, people loved your Richard II. It sold really well. And if you get a
Because
good,
they did weird stuff with it.
well, that's exactly it.
That's I think a big part of it too.
Exactly. And I mean, if you want to play with it, take one of the lesser done ones, like the Cymbeline, like the Tituses, like the Henry VI, like the Richard II, and you can play with them and have some fun and get people into them, because there's not these existing expectations. Okay, we're doing Midsummer again. All right, break out the donkey head. How are they going to do it this time? Oh, look, it's so unique. They're doing same-sex couples. Oh my God, that's never been done before.
How novel. Queer people
How novel.
exist.
How novel. Or, oh my God, they're doing a R&J, but it's, two different races of people. Oh my God, how novel is this? It's like, no, there's a lot of other things you can do that can push boundaries in other ways than just, the trotting out of the same type of classic plays that we're going to do. A slightly different spin that everybody's kind of done before. So I do think that, the Henry VI plays are ones I think could do with a bit more loving, in my opinion. So, Ryan?
I think also the history plays, they just get like such a bad rap too of like, this is so boring. It's like, it can be done. Like stuff can be done with it. Look at the production we just watched of Henry V. Like it's more of the less boring ones, but like you can get spicy with things. Like take something off the page that's never been done before.
And I mean,
I dare you.
Yeah, right. Jill dares you. But I mean, like even history itself, like I hate when people go, oh, I took history in high school and it was boring. It's like, well, it's only boring if it's taught to you as a boring thing. History is a living thing that is cyclical and comes back again and again. And it's a fascinating way to learn about yourself and about your humanity, because you can look at history and go, oh, look, fascism is coming back again. Why is that happening? What is going on? What happened before World War II Germany that made people turn to fascism? In Hitler, like what caused that? And what is happening today that, is causing people to turn to these autocratic rulers going, I want a strong man. What is not being answered societally that makes people go, hey, I want to go invade this other country because tangentially somewhere in the system, I somehow have a claim to that property. Like history is a living thing that is fascinating to learn. If you actually have somebody dynamic teaching you it, and Shakespeare getting it up on its feet and going, look at what we can do with this action and this drama. Like, it makes it interesting, and history plays need more love.
And
Ryan.
You know what's not interesting?
Yeah. What?
Midsummer Night's Dream for the 15th freaking time. If you're putting it on again next year, all I can say one thing to you is hee-haw. I'm like,
yes. Yeah. Until they cast you as
take your ass out of here.
Take your ass out of here. Sorry, my last complaint about it.
Yeah. Until Dewey, they cast you as bottom in that production, and you'll be like, oh my God, guys, this is revolutionary. You gotta come see.
Yeah. I'll complain about it all the way until the day they give me a paycheck for it. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is a
great show. Great show.
This is my favorite show. This is my top Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Probably better than Coriolanus.
Yeah. Okay, Ryan. We keep teeing it over to you, but we keep cutting you off. Okay, go for it.
It's fine. So much has already been said. I don't know how much I have to add. I think we've exhausted all the points about why this one is so frequently performed. I guess just to jump on maybe a few things that have already been brought up about which one maybe would get done differently or which ones what you'd like to see. Jill, you sort of talked about how you would like to see do the entire Henriade cycle, but year after year after year. As much as I would love to see that too, I think a part of the pitfalls of that kind of serialization is that if the first one bombs, no one's going to come back for the second one.
Then make sure it doesn't bomb. Do something with it that entices.
That's the first pitfall. But the second pitfall is if you over serialize, I think you're going to get a lot of people who are be like, oh, I'm not going to see Henry VI Part 2 because I missed Henry VI Part 1 last year. Even though these are plays that can stand alone, the second you put Part 2 in the title of something, or Part 3 for, God help us, in the title of something, you are limiting the audience that is going to engage with it. So that's why I think we see so many versions of, like, in a single season, it doesn't happen, even this doesn't happen often. It's more likely that they'll do a truncated Henry VI in 2 parts, not all 3, and then you can catch both of them. I think the kinds of serialization that, at least in our Canadian theater context, that we're seeing a lot more of are the 2-part plays where you basically buy both of your tickets at once and see them either in a single day or within the same week. Like we saw Fall on Your Knees at Can Stage. They're doing The Inheritance this year. The Shaw Festival did the Mahabharata, and those are the kinds of things.
My roommate was in that.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
But those are the kinds of serialization that you could get people on board with, because it's just an investment in, I'm going to see this whole thing now, not having to think, will I remember what happened in Henry VI Part 1 a year later to be able to follow Part 2, or did I even catch that? And I can understand from a programming perspective the hesitancy of doing something that long. Also, it's asking certain actors to sign on for such a long period that, maybe some are itching at the bit to do that because, yes, job security, I'd love to have that, but others might be like,
yeah.
But
I'm like, are you kidding me? An entire year's worth of employment? Sign me up.
Yeah, but others might be, people are like, have film commitments and other things that might be hard to commit your schedule that far in advance. And I can understand logistically from an artistic director perspective could be a bit of a nightmare. But I think.
But then you just keep extending it and then bring other people in.
Okay,
Great comment.
Yeah, which there you go.
Yeah.
But part of
Doing
me,
great, great comment.
while I do understand this impulse towards serialization, I would like to maybe trick people, I think is my alternative proposal, into just having a play that's like titled Henry IV, for example. People are like, oh yeah, sure, this is a Shakespeare thing I've heard of, or even people who know that's supposed to be 2 parts be like, ooh, I wonder how they've truncated it.
Yeah.
And then you get there and joke's on you, you're just watching Part 2. And you kind of just have to like flap along with your feelers and be like, yeah, okay, this is a standalone play. I should be able to just get context clues and understand who these people are. And like, I think that's almost something that I would be more excited by, just stepping into a Part 2 of something without Part 1. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the movie Buckaroo Banzai and the Eighth Dimension, or I forget if that's the exact title.
No, I don't know this movie.
It's a comedy movie. There, basically the shtick is that it's pretending it's an individual episode of a long-running sci-fi serialized thing, like Flash Gordon or whatever.
Okay.
But the joke is it's the only one. It's like as if this is like chapter 8 of a long, sprawling story, and it does not pause for a second for the audience to catch what they're, the things, because those things don't exist, but everyone is playing it fully straight as if this is something in the backstories. And it's like, it's so fun. And it kind of, the shtick of it is capturing the essence of back in the day before like streaming in the MCU, where you actually couldn't like read online a Wikipedia article that catches you up, and you just maybe picked up a book because you thought the cover was cool and you read it like, I don't know what's going on because it's apparently chapter 8 in the series, but whatever, I'm invested. And then you could go back and find the others. I would love if people approach Shakespeare in a similar way. And like, realistically, a lot of these history plays work as standalones. You don't really need, they're all 5 acts, and it's not that Shakespeare ended thinking like, oh no, I have so much more of the story to tell. More often than not, and like you could read Nicholas Green's book about serializing Shakespeare, more often than not, it was a sequel cash grab. It's that, the very first one in the early modern period to have a Part 2 was Christopher Marlowe's Tamburlaine. And there is a passage in the opening prologue of that as well, because Tamburlaine was so successful, we got you more of it. And that is the market logic behind this. You can pick up these history stories anywhere in Holinshed's Chronicles, as Shakespeare did, and just be like, yeah, I'll start the story here, and within 5 acts, I think I could get it here. And if the audience wants another one, I'll give them more of them. There isn't necessarily, it's been a while since I've read that particular book by Nicholas Green, which I recommend to see. I don't remember what he said was maybe have been. He was kind of tracing the evidence of how premeditated these series arcs might have been for Shakespeare. But yeah, it is open for debate, let's say, and I think we should be, I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe, more so than anything, has forced us into this mindset of thinking we need to consume the whole of these large series, and we can't consume the whole. There's no point in watching Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3, even if maybe that's the best one and you could totally watch it on its own. And TED Talk.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, on that note, because we've been going at this for almost 2 hours, let's head on out of here.
The length of the play.
Yeah, basically it's almost the whole length of the play. So, let's head on out of here and let's head back over to, Agincourt and Harfleur and all that good stuff. But before we go, Dewey, where can people find and follow you?
They can find and follow me on Instagram at I would say hashtag. I'm not a hashtag.
What? You're
At-
not?
Hashtag
no.
Dewey Stewart.
Yeah, at Dewey Stew, DEWEYSTEW.
Love that. Awesome. Jill, where can people follow you?
Yes, folks can follow me. My artist Instagram account is Jillian.Robin. You'll see funny stories and cover snippets and upcoming projects that are hopefully down the line because everyone loves being an employed actor. That's my
Absolutely.
personal plug.
Love that, Jill.
Ryan?
Ryan?
Yeah, no need to find and follow me personally, but if you like me and like hearing my theater thoughts, most of them tend to live here on Cup of Hemlock Theatre. That's the show you're watching right now. We're at COH Theatre on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Not calling it the other thing. We've had our fun. And we are Cup of Hemlock Theatre on YouTube, where you might be watching this. Cup of Hemlock Theatre podcast in the podcast places where you might be listening to this with your ears.
Love that. Love that. Wonderful. And you can follow me at Mackenzie on all social media platforms. You can follow my musical antics over at Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast where Ryan and I did a wonderful mini series deep dive into the show Gallivant. Who knows? Season 2 could be coming sooner than you think. We don't know. But there we go. But yeah, you can follow me there. And then, yeah, just keep, getting out your Shakespeare folios and read some Shakespeare because, yes, it can be fun and dynamic and not as boring as you remember it back in high school. So there we go.
Nice.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Once more onto the breach, dear friends. Once more. Cheers.
Cheers.